Hi everyone, this is my first of two videos that I'm planning to make today, and this one is going to cover the topic of abortion because we've been talking a lot about abortions lately in the news. There's been a lot of talk, especially since Texas just passed a recent law to abortion. And so I'm going to mention a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some common arguments for abortion, and I'm going to respond to the pro-life arguments against abortion. And so I'm going to do that in the context of Vi Rose La Bianca's video. So I stumbled upon her video last night, and her video is a response to 8 questions that I had for atheists that I made quite a while ago. So it's kind of surprising to find a video by Vi here because number one, I don't know her. I don't think I've really ever encountered her before. Or at least if I have, it was in the past, and I truly don't recall. But it's interesting that she made a response video. But this one area I really want to pin down on, because I feel that the pro-life position needs to be explained a little bit, because some people are demonizing us and putting us into a camp as if we're the bad guys here. But the decision that you're going to terminate the pregnancy is what they like to call it. You're going to terminate the pregnancy is not a decision that I think should easily be made. And in fact, I would say it shouldn't be made at all. And so that is something that is a pro-choice position that I one time had in my life. I was one time considered pro-choice. I one time drove a friend to an abortion clinic, regretfully have to say, but I currently am pro-life, and I'm pro-life for a number of very good reasons. So without further ado, I'm going to turn us over to Vi Rose La Bianca's video, and I'll just call her V to shorten it for the rest of this video. But I'm going to go over to her video so you can hear exactly what she has to say with respect to this particular argument.
All right, number 4 is timely and particularly annoying. And if you watched the clip from Tuesday, I want to say, of me kind of just hammering at the violinist argument that Gohan brought to Skeptic Generation to argue for his pro-choice position.
Let me stop right there because we're going to get into this. So what exactly is the violinist argument? So the violinist argument says this: imagine yourself waking up in a hospital connected to a famous violinist. You discover that the violinist needs to be connected to you in order to survive. You didn't consent to this, so you have the option to reject the connection. People who argue in favor of this argument equate this to an abortion. However, let's ask some questions. Does the morality of your decision change if, number one, you consented to bringing the violinist into your hospital room, knowing this may result in his connection to you? Number two, the violinist happens to be your son, whom you gave up for adoption. And number three, the connection to the violinist will only last 9 months, at which point your son would be disconnected alive. Consider those questions in the context of the violinist argument. Some people also like to use the kidney argument. They say, we wouldn't legally force a mother to donate her kidney to a child, so why should we legally force a mother to allow a baby to grow inside her uterus? The kidney is made for the mom. That is the answer, while the mother's uterus is made for the child. The purpose of the kidney and the uterus, those two purposes are different. The purpose of the kidney is to rid one's body of waste and toxic substances, while the purpose of the uterus or the womb is to nourish and house a fertilized egg until the fetus or offspring is ready to be delivered. So I'm going to give you some abortion statistics, which we'll get into after we listen to a little bit more of V's video. But in case you don't know this, in the United States, since Roe v. Wade was passed in 1973, about 60 million babies' lives have been terminated early. And that is about equivalent to the size of the nation of Italy, just to put that into a perspective. Now, what are some interesting percentages that are actually rather sad? I'm going to tell you about the proportions in demographics here in just a moment. But before I do that, I will turn it back over to Vi to continue her conversation.
Pro-life position, excuse me. You will probably recognize a lot of what I'm about to say. 4, why have so many atheists determined, at least she's given us a little bit more nuance here, so many as opposed to all. Why have so many atheists determined that the life of a fetus in a mother's womb is less valuable than the life of his or her mother? Age discrimination? When is a human considered a human to them? And this is, to be fair, some atheists do take the position that the fetus is not human and humanity is endowed upon it at a later point. I don't know the science well enough to know exactly when that happens. I don't think there has been a consensus as to when that happens. Rachel Oates did a really good video on the concept of assigning humanity to a fetus across the development cycle of
It completely an arbitrary assignment across the development cycle. Let me share a little bit with you here. So we're gonna skip back here for just a moment, and I'm going to show you a couple of files here that I can explain my view. And so here we go. We're going to talk about some of what V mentioned, and we're going to mention some more stuff. So just in case you don't know the proportions here, Guttmacher Institute, which is a U.S. Institute, and it's also pro-choice, they have looked at abortions and they looked at the percentages. So 35%, 34% of all abortions are white women, which it represents about 33% of our population here in the United States. 37% of the abortions that occurred traditionally are Black women, and that's about 7% of the population. And 22% of abortions are Hispanic women, and that's about 10% of the population. And 8% of abortions are other. So in other words, if you look at this, you realize that unfortunately, the abortions are being mostly done by people who are of color. And the challenge with that is many of these abortions are due to a lack of contraception. They're due to a lack of people taking care of themselves and making sure that they're taking contraceptives if they plan to have sex. But anyway, it's disproportionately impacting people of color. So if we go back and we realize that 60 million people since 1973 have been aborted, we can realize that probably those abortions were again disproportionately affecting people of color. This is not something that is very good. Obviously, we would have a much more diverse population today had those abortions not occurred. A total of 619,591 abortions for the 2018 were reported to the CDC from 49 reporting areas. Among 48 reporting areas with data each year during 2009 through 2018, a total of 614 and change abortions were reported. The abortion rate was 11.3 per 1,000 women between 15 and 44 years, or about 189 abortions per 1,000 live births. So we've got a lot of abortions occurring. So here's some common arguments. They say it's safer than illegal abortions. However, over the 46 years, again, we've got about 1.3 million abortions are performed legally. According to the CDC, 130,000 abortions were performed illegally in 1972, which decreased to 17,000 in 1974. In other words, quite a few people do not have an abortion or did not get an abortion when it was illegal. Illegal abortions caused 39 deaths in 1972 and 5 deaths in 1974. So in other words, if we take a look and we put all this stuff together, the absolute number of abortions would actually decrease by 90% if it were not legal. Another issue is our legal system. Our Declaration of Independence makes it quite clear that we are supposed to have equal rights. All humans are endowed equally. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So denying any human the right to life comes from either one, arbitrarily creating assessments of what it means to be humans, which you just saw V do, and two, dehumanizing them, calling them tissue or clumps of cells. With the former, if the arbitrary assessment doesn't apply to all humans, it's not valid. We know the latter is untrue. If given time to gestate, most fetuses will mature and grow. So what happened in the United States in 1973? And I'm noticing, I think my slide is not showing to you. So I'm seeing my slides not sharing. So I'm switching this up. I want to say hi to Timothy. Also hi to Charlie Reed. So in 1973, 2 landmark decisions occurred, and they're extremely strange that these occurred in the same year. The Endangered Species Act was passed, which made it illegal to possess, take, or destroy turtle eggs and other endangered wildlife, fish, and plants. Okay? If you destroy turtle eggs, you're going to receive a hefty fine and/or prison time. In the decision that also came in that year, Roe v. Wade, governments cannot prohibit any abortions in the first trimester. They can prohibit some in the second, and it's very limited in the third. So here's a quote. In Roe v. Wade, the Texas state argued that fetus is a person within the language and meaning of the 14th Amendment, to which Justice Harry Blackmun responded, if this suggestion of personhood is established, the appellate's case, of course, collapses, for the fetus's right to life would then be guaranteed, specifically by the amendment. However, Justice Blackmun then came to the conclusion that the word person, as used in the 14th Amendment, does not include the unborn. This is completely fallacious reasoning. So just to give you an idea of other not endangered species that are currently protected much better than we are here in the United States. One such protection has been given to the bald eagle. At one time they were endangered, but they were taken off the endangered list in 2007. So they're protected. It says here, bald eagles are no longer an endangered species, but bald and golden eagles are still protected by multiple federal laws, such as the Eagle Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the Lacey Act, and other state and municipal protections. Eagles, their feathers and parts, nests, nest trees, and winter nighttime roosts are all protected by federal laws. The Eagle Act prohibits anyone taking, possessing, or transporting any eagle or eagle parts, including nests, eggs, feathers, without prior authorization. This includes inactive nests as well as active nests. Activities that directly or indirectly lead to take are prohibited without a permit. Okay, so think about that. If you are arrested for that, you could be subject to a fine and prison time. So in other words, if I sum these up, I'll say that the eagles have more protections in the United States than humans. Where is the logic in that? Texas abortion law. So Texas recently banned most abortions after 6 weeks and unauthorized citizens to enforce this law. It authorized citizens to enforce this law. The abortion providers in Texas said that, holy cow, 85 to 90% of abortions are performed after 6 weeks. So again, Texas banned abortions after 6 weeks, but most abortions that occur are conducted after 6 weeks in Texas. This was from the New York Times. And here's a quote. A physician may not knowingly perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman if the physician detected a fetal heartbeat for the unborn child or failed to perform a test to detect a fetal heartbeat. A physician does not violate this section if the physician performed a test for a fetal heartbeat and did not detect a fetal heartbeat. So just so you know, a fetal heartbeat is heard after 3 to 4 weeks after conception, which is 5 to 6 weeks after the date of the last menstrual period. Here's an unborn baby from an image I found online at 5 weeks. Teeny, but still a baby. If given the time to develop properly, this baby will grow into a beautiful human. As famously said by God to the prophet Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. God makes us very special, and we're special in the womb. So just so you understand how pregnancies are timed, because not everybody understands this. So usually between 1 and 2 weeks after a woman's period, she ovulates. This is the window in which she can become pregnant and conceive. That's when the sperm and the egg join together. Between 8 and 9 days after conception, the blastocyst implants in the uterine wall. So many women, self-included, get symptoms such as breast tenderness and cramping around this point. I knew immediately when my second son, I remember telling my husband, I said, I've got the same symptoms I had with my first son. And he said, no way, I can't believe it. It can't be that soon, because we got pregnant right after I had the first son, got pregnant with the second one. It was an amazing time. One of the best times of my life, I can say. So the pregnancy is timed to go back to the last day of her last period. So just so you understand this, a woman could be considered 4 weeks pregnant, even though conception could have occurred around 2 weeks after that date. Okay, just so you understand how that works. Your timing going back all the way to the date of the last menstrual period. So here's a baby's development. Here's fetal growth from 4 to 40 weeks and what you can see. So I will make quite clear that a human life begins at conception. Scientists have confirmed that. I'm going to show you some studies. If we found a human blastocyst on the moon, we would say we discovered life on the moon. So I'll tell you, one of the reasons I changed from being pro-choice to being pro-life is because of what happened during my second pregnancy. Actually, it was my third pregnancy, because my first pregnancy was unfortunately miscarried. But in my third pregnancy, I went to the nurse. I went to have an ultrasound. And during the ultrasound and also the amniocentesis, while she was performing the amniocentesis, she said, "Oh my, you have two soft markers for Down syndrome. You have echogenic heart and echogenic bowels." Now you can see what the ultrasound looked like right there. Those are actually the ultrasounds of my sons. And so the baby was about 15 weeks. And I was told that I can, quote, terminate the pregnancy. I couldn't even believe my ears that somebody would tell me that I'm going to terminate the life of this beautiful child already inside me. I was able to tell that he was male. I was actually surprised. I had the thought that I was going to have a female, but I could tell he was male. I could see his little arms and his little legs and his cute little body. And she just made it sound so flippant that I can terminate the pregnancy. I was disgusted, absolutely disgusted. At that moment, I determined that no matter what I was having my baby, my husband was right on board with me. And proudly, happily, we delivered the baby soon afterwards. And he was born without Down syndrome, but I would have had him anyway. Here's some studies just showing you. This is from the Princeton website. So at Princeton, it says quite clearly on this website, there are lacks to academic studies. It says development of the embryo begins at stage 1 when a sperm fertilizes and what's that word? Oculi. I can't read that word very well because it's so small. I have to try to make this a little bit bigger. Together they form a zygote, okay? Human development begins after the union of male and female gametes or germ cells during a process known as fertilization, conception. Okay, so human life begins at conception. If somebody tries to tell you that's not true, they're being very unscientific. Okay, so we have plenty of studies besides those two that I just mentioned. Some say, oh, well, babies don't feel pain before 24 weeks. Okay, so some people have decided that babies don't have any pain or sense prior to gestation, prior to 24 weeks. So they've tried to legitimize killing people. But what of people who are born with congenital insensitivity to pain and temperature? Do we kill them too? Is feeling pain something that's necessary to determine whether or not somebody should be allowed to live? It's ridiculous. Babies aren't conscious. They don't have perception of identity. Yeah, well, does that mean that we should also extend this to people who are sleeping or in a coma? They're not conscious. Should we kill them too? Newborn infants don't have a perception of identity. Should we kill them as well? Again, if you want to apply these statements equally across humans, you have to be fair here. You can't be playing one game for one and being hypocritical and not also extending your statement to other humans in the same conditions. Some say, what about rape and incest victims? Just note, we don't legislate a rule based on 1% exception. Rape and incest comprise 1% of all abortions. 99% consented. Now, look at the case Ben Shapiro has noted of the person who plays baseball outside his house, accidentally hitting a neighbor's window. Is he liable to fix the window? He didn't plan on hitting the window, but by playing baseball outside of his house, he consented to the potential of hitting the window. Therefore, he's liable. In other words, if you're liable for an action that's taken, okay? So 99% is what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the 1% exceptions. I'm talking about 99% of the cases. I'm talking about especially focusing in on people who feel that the birth is inconvenient. Some say very few regret having abortions. Now, I've talked to quite a few people who've had abortions and they have regretted it. They've regretted it many years after. In fact, I ran 2 small polls on Twitter a while back. In the first, 125 people responded, including an option for those who just wanted to see the results. 11.2%, 14, regretted their abortions, while 29 says they did not. In the second ongoing poll, 77 had responded at the point when I had written this, 15.6% or 12 regretted having the abortion and 24 did not. So researchers from the University of California at San Francisco followed 667 women across 30 clinics after they received an elective abortion, finding that the majority had either positive feelings or no emotional at all toward their decision both a week later and 5 years later, according to a study released last week in the Journal of Social Science and Medicine. Writing to the National Review, researcher Michael J. New noted that women who volunteer to respond to questions following an abortion are more likely to be the ones who feel positively about it, and therefore the findings do not represent the full spectrum of women who have had abortions. A professor at Catholic University of America and a scholar with the pro-life movement, Charlotte Lozier Institute, noted that of all the women asked to participate, less than 40% agreed, and roughly 30% of the 667 who participated had stopped responded by the end of the 5-year study. In other words, there's a selection bias. What about medication abortions? Some people make that claim. So the Guttmacher Institute reports that medication abortions are on the rise, accounting for more than a third of all abortions recorded in 2017. The most commonly used medication abortion protocol is only prescribed in the first trimester and includes 2 drugs. The first blocks the embryo from receiving vital progesterone. The second, taken 24 to 48 hours later, induces labor. Now, Chuck Donovan, president of the Charlotte Lozier Institute, worries that medication abortions have the potential to cause more trauma than an in-clinic procedure, as women may feel more responsibility over the abortion when they have to take the medication themselves. He also said a medication abortion presents the possibility that a woman will see her deceased baby after the medication runs its course. Bond at Surrendering the Secret said she's counseled many women who had that exact experience. She agrees the trauma from medication abortions may be even more acute than that experienced after a surgical procedure. You're not told the truth and then are left alone to suffer through the trauma, intense cramping, hemorrhaging, delivery of baby, she said. Again, continuing on this idea that few regret it, Christians working in post-abortive ministry have seen abortion regrets stir up in women long after the 5-year span of the research. The majority of women we see, this is a quote, usually 15, 20, 30, 40 years removed, said Carrie Bond, former national training director for Surrendering the Secret. Counselors and staff like Bond are particularly likely to encounter those who have grown to regret their abortions or to discover that they had been holding back the emotional weight of the decision. Abby Johnson, the former Planned Parenthood staffer who went on to become a pro-life advocate, shared a similar observation on Twitter. Here's what she said. Here's real talk. Trauma doesn't usually present until 10 to 15 post-traumatic event, 10 to 15 years post-traumatic event. The women have no idea how they will feel about their abortions many years later. People are culturally conditioned to hide their pain. The Silent No More campaign has hosted 6,469 men and women with abortion testimony. So you can go there and find that on the Christianity Today website. Here's what someone said on this particular website. This is not a blob of tissue and the repercussions never end. That's Angela from South Carolina. She said, this is a big business that only sees you as a commodity and has lied to you through so many channels that you now believe the lie. Had I been in ultrasound the week before my procedure, there would have been another life on this planet and one less small torn body in a plastic container somewhere in a back room. Sorry to give that very emotional sense there, but it's something that's really terrible. Here's what Keisha said from New York. I used to be pro-choice because I didn't know any better. Christ has opened my eyes to the truth. I want to make it my life's mission to save those who are unable to speak for themselves and to be a voice of reason to other young ladies. And then some might say, well, what about, people like to say, what about, you have the option if you carry the pregnancy, you have the option of giving a baby up for adoption. And just so you know, if you go in the United States and you look at the AmericanAdoptions.com, you're going to see that there are currently about 2 million couples waiting to adopt children in the United States, which is about 36 families for every one child put up for adoption. There are good people out there who are infertile and would love to adopt. If you're in the position where you're pregnant, they'd love to adopt your child. We have, again, 36-to-1 ratio. There are lots of people out there who are unable to have a child of their own, or maybe they want to add kids to their family, or whatever the situation is, but they are ready to adopt children. So if you can carry the baby, give life, bring life, be that life giver, that's just something that's tremendous to do. So now I'm going to go back to V's video. Here we go. So let's just get it back here. Chrome tab. Whoops, wait. Hold on. We're going to see more of what she says. See if I've responded to it through my slides, and anything I haven't responded to, I will respond to as she goes.
Of a pregnancy, I would highly recommend checking that out because she explained it much better than I can right now. But the problem here is that you're assuming, again, SJ, that I don't consider a fetus to be a human. And for the sake of this argument, I'm going to grant you that a rice grain sized piece of I don't know, like protoplasm or what the fuck ever. See, this is why I'm not a scientist educator. Is a human, right? We can grant that for the sake of this argument, even if I'm on the fence about that.
So you can see right here the dehumanizing approach that V has taken to describe a human. It's not only size discrimination, it's age discrimination. And it's trying to say that a human doesn't have because the human is very small, the human does not have the right to life. And so that is, again, something that's not applied equally across humans. It's totally unfair. Again, as I pointed out, all the scientific studies have said that life begins at conception. And if somebody tries to tell you that it's not the case, they need to provide the studies that suggest otherwise. Life does begin at conception. There's no other way to look at that. It doesn't begin at some arbitrary point during the pregnancy.
It's not about who is more human. It's not about who inherently has more value. It's about bodily autonomy, regardless of how human someone is. They cannot impose and use someone else's body against that other person's consent.
So what I would like to let her know is, again, as we saw here, 99% of women consented to sex. When you consent to sex, you have to know that there is a possibility that you're going to get pregnant. Unless you're a complete ignoramus, or somebody who is unfortunately not on our planet, you would not be aware that having sex is going to result in a pregnancy. It's likely it's going to result in a pregnancy. And so when you have sex, you consent to sex, you are opening the door for the likelihood of pregnancy. And so the simple fact that your uterus, which was created by God to bear a child, each month goes through a process getting ready for the child. And when you allow a sperm to come into your uterus, you are preparing the situation for a child to be born. Okay. The sperm, the egg, they unite, the baby's conceived, and then the process kicks off. Your uterus wasn't made for you. Your uterus was made for the baby, period. So on that note, so yeah, I read that Violinist Argument up front. I hope you enjoyed this chat. I'm going to be back on my channel in a little while today. I've planned something I've been working on actually for the last few weeks. This particular video I'm going to do today. It's going to focus on the majority text and the critical text. And it's going to focus on the fact that a lot of scholars today, the majority of scholars, are focusing mainly on the critical text. They believe that the critical text is what we should be using to derive all of the translations, our English translations of the Bible. And so I'm going to talk about why they did that, what the history is, and exactly what we should think about. So I hope that you guys will come back to that. And stripper liquor, I couldn't agree with you more. The violinist argument is very ridiculous. It's absurd. And so, and as far as being on the endangered species list, as I mentioned before for Rabbit Hole, I'm just trying to pick up these questions here. It says that it sounds like a bad analogy, the humans on an endangered species list. I could say it's a pretty endangered species to be an unborn child of color in New York City. It's actually more likely you're going to be aborted than you're going to be born. So yeah, rather endangered for sure. But other than that, even if the fact that we're not endangered, there's about 8 billion humans on this planet right now. 108 billion have walked the planet, according to the Population Reference Bureau. But we've been quickly shortening the potential for people to come onto our planet through these abortions. And so that was one of the things I wanted to spend some time on today. But also please note that currently eagles are not on the endangered list. They've been off the list since 2007, and they are given protections, much more than humans. Okay? So neither the eagle nor the human is endangered, but eagles are given many more protections than humans in the United States. If you guys think that's right, there's something wrong with you. So thank you so much. Come back within a half hour. I will be back on my channel. Please like, subscribe, and do come again. And just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do it all in the glory of God. Thank you. Yes, there is a lack of reverence. Thank you, Timothy. I do want to say thank you before I get off here to the people who are in here. I see Charlie Reed, Stripper Liquor, Rabbit Hole, Timothy. Charlie, I just got that on Google Images. I found a few images. I will grant you that if that's not exactly 5 weeks, maybe it's 6 weeks, but it's between 5 and 6 weeks probably, okay? the image I got. I got some different images. I could probably go put a collection of them out there, but whatever it is, it's a little baby inside your belly, maybe very small. So give it time. It's going to flourish, and you can know that for sure. Thank you. Bye-bye. I'll be back at 1:45, so just over 20 minutes.